that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN 350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. This is Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. I'm here to ask you for your support. Finding honest Native-centered news is not easy. But with your support, we're able to provide accurate information about Standing Rock, Line 3, treaty violations, and COVID-19 in our Native communities. Please visit Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon and donate if you can. That's Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon. Pinigigi, and thank you for your support.
For too long, American Indian tribes have faced a competitive disadvantage when litigating against powerful forces. With its American Indian law and policy practice, Robbins Kaplan, LLP, seeks to redefine excellence for high-stakes litigation in Indian country. They have worked hand-in-hand with tribes to implement the Tribal Law and Order Act, fighting against diminishment of tribal lands and natural resources, and improving public safety on reservations. The Robbins Kaplan American Indian Law and Policy Practice serves tribes and individuals on commercial, government investigations, agency and tribal boundary disputes, as well as personal injury. Founded and led by former United States Attorneys Brendan Johnson and Tim Purdon, their American Indian Law and Policy Practice exists to bring justice to tribal clients whose claims in the past have been dismissed or ignored due to their underdog status. If you or your tribe are facing legal issues, contact robinskaplan.com or call toll-free at 1-800-553-9910.
Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States, and 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected. Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf. Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy. As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired. Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl.
Portions of Native Roots Radio may be pre-recorded.
It's a good day to be Indigenous.
Get up, stand up.
They are going to become more brutal.
Couldn't cut, any cut again.
Because all the hippies were trying to be Indians anyway.
They're going to become more repressive because it's a matter of dollars and their illusionary concepts of power.
Hey, Victor.
We must live in balance with the earth.
And also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee.
I am awake.
Welcome to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakanja Hade.
This is actually State Representative Heather Keeler taking over the show today. Robert and Wendy are out, and it was a good day to take over. It was a good day to get together and have an honest, open conversation. Today is February 14th, and as many people in this space want to celebrate another holiday, we as Indigenous women, as Indigenous legislators, really want to highlight MMIW and the awareness around that. As some of you know, I have finished my first year into the second part of my first term as a state legislator here in the state of Minnesota. I am an enrolled member of the Yankton Sioux tribe, which is the Hunktawan Nation down in South Dakota with lineage to Eastern Shoshone. I mention that because I think it's important for us to recognize our roots and why we do some of the work that we do. I do not do this work alone. And so I figured if we're going to have a conversation, I wanted to bring some of my powerful sisters in this work along with me. And so the first person that I want to introduce and I'm going to share the mic with is Senator Mary Kunesh. And I want to talk a little bit about our relationship and how this relationship kind of was even built. It was built around murdered and missing Indigenous women. And I'm not sure, Senator Coonish, if you probably even know this, but a couple years ago, as I was just serving as a Native American liaison, we started to hear rumblings about we should apply to be on this task force. The state is working on this task force. It's around murdered and missing Indigenous women. And it was like, what? Our state has a task force that's like actually caring about us? Like, it was so amazing. And I remember people in my community really excited to put in the applications to be part of the task force. And I remember that starting in our state and how amazing that was. And that was a part of your leadership and your effort. And then it kind of stemmed this idea that, well, I want to do that work too. you know, it was the realization that like we can be in these seats and do this work for our people. And when we join our sisters in that work, it's so powerful. And so I guess I don't know that I've ever publicly said to you, like, Pilame for leading me down a path that I never knew that I wanted to be on, but also joining it with you has been so wonderful. I know that you were in the House. We never got to serve together there. You moved over to the Senate. But tell us a little bit about you, your journey around the task force, and then we'll come back and kind of talk about the office after that.
Senator Mary Kunesh here. I'm descendant of the Standing Rock Nation. And I did not know that, Heather. That was, I think, I had goosebumps and my chest got all, all gooey because of that. That's really great because as legislators, we're doing our work and we might be passing our bills, but we don't know all the time the long-reaching effect that we have on other people. And for if there's one thing I want to do as an elected official is to inspire other women, other Native women, other folks that have been, as you always say, left out of the conversation, to step up and be part of the change. I was a teacher for 25 years, a library media specialist. I ran a banquet center in Northeast Minneapolis. I mean, I had 3 kids. That's who I was. And it was as I became more and more aware of issues in Indian country, because I have a sister who's a Indian law lawyer and a brother who's an archaeologist that works on mounds. And I realized that they inspired me. Like, I knew there was work to be done. And getting to understand the whole kind of political scene, like, how do you even start? How do you have that idea in the back of your head, like, I can do that. I should do something about that. I didn't like the way our schools are always underfunded, or we're over testing the kids, or too many mandates without the funds for our teachers. And so I figured that out little by little. Thankfully, my daughter, who's in like political organizing, pulled me in. I need volunteers here. I need volunteers there. And that's really how I started to figure it out. And the opportunity came for me to run for office. And it's a scary thought. It's a scary thing to do. Where do you put yourself on the issues? How do you raise money? Because you need money to run for office and stay in office. How do I know about all these issues? I always feel like I have to be an expert on the issues, even though I'm not that familiar. And so it was those sort of things that propelled me into the legislature. And then getting elected into the House, we already had 2 Native American women there, and I joined them with Representative Becker Finn, and we got some shit done. I mean, we did. Pardon my language. But we really, really, really did. And it was because we told people what was going on. We shared with them the historic discrepancies and the violence and the lack of resources in Indian country, as well as, in the urban centers where our kids are going to school and don't have teachers that look like them, that speak their language, that understand they might be a few days or a few weeks late getting to school in the fall because it's ricing season. We build our school schedule around farmers. Well, how about if we start building our school schedule around ricing season and the seasons of our Indigenous people? And then, came the awareness, a stronger awareness of the violence against our Native women. And it was certainly illustrated by the really, really tragic death of Savannah Gray LaFontaine. I mean, that was horrendous. If folks don't know, she was from South Dakota, 28 years old, pregnant, 8 months pregnant with her first child, and she went missing. She went to visit a neighbor in the apartment building, and nobody saw her again until some kayakers found her body in the river, and the baby had been cut from her womb. I mean, just such a terrible, terrible tragedy. And it turns out it was those neighbors that had plotted all along to steal her baby. Sorry, Ogama. But, that is what spurred me in the middle of the summer to go back to the Capitol along with Canada's preliminary report on their MMIW and work with the people, work with the community. I reached out to everyone I knew who was working on violence against women and said, help me build this bill. Help me craft this missing and murdered Indigenous women's task force. And they did. And I owe it all to them. Or maybe I don't owe it all to them, but they should all be patting themselves on the back, because it was, their stories and their testimony. Missy Babineau never missed a hearing, told her own personal story that is so tragic. Great grandma Mary Lyons came. Henrietta from up north came all the way down on the days that we needed her. And it was the community that really, really did it. And I just was kind of the conduit. And from there, good things have happened. Good things are happening now. We've got good change, and we're going to continue this work for sure. And I'm so glad that you joined us at the legislature, Heather. You are a force to be reckoned with, no lie.
Well, it's because I'm joining a team. I think it's important that we recognize, the work of a team and what we do together. I have some other friends here. I know we're about to go to break, but I do want to talk quickly. Savannah, she was actually living in Fargo. She's from Turtle Mountains. That was actually one of the things that really, I think, wedged Representative Ruth Buffalo and I together, was actually that search and that effort in our community of Fargo-Moorhead. We'll talk more about that as we return. And when we return, we'll be bringing Senator Ruth Buffalo and Senator Red Dawn Foster from South Dakota to join the conversation, because again, we are a group of legislative Indigenous women who are trying to be at the table to have a voice and to make changes for positive impacts, not only for us, but for our next generations. And so please continue to stay with us. We will be back shortly. Pilame.
We are your relatives.
We are your relations.
Brothers,
sisters,
sons,
daughters. And some of us are your grandchildren.
We are your community. Historically, we held places of honor and respect. Because of the impact of colonization, some of us are rejected, thrown out from family, friends, and community, set up as targets for sexual violence, sex trafficked, humiliated, tortured, and murdered. Everybody has the right to be safe. We are your relatives. Remember,
homophobia is not traditional.
Sponsored by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Hey, Ogama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
You may not think of it, but winter is a great time to take care of those exterior home projects. This is Chad, owner of AM950 for Snap Construction. Most people wait until the warmer months for their exterior home projects, but labor costs are actually lowest in the winter. And that's true for the contractor I trust, Snap Construction. Arguably the most well-reviewed exterior contractor and insulation contractor in the metro. Are you noticing ice dams on your house? Or is your furnace constantly running and you're still not comfortable? In addition to your exterior home projects, winter is also a great time to get your insulation checked with a free energy audit from Snap Construction. The average cost to upgrade your insulation is oftentimes less than a new furnace. Plus, there are rebates available from your energy provider when you upgrade your insulation. As always, Snap Construction stands by their work with a lifetime craftsmanship warranty. So don't wait for prices to rise in the warmer months. Get a free estimate now by calling 612-333-SNAP, 612-333-SNAP, or go to snapconstruction.com.
You're listening to Native Roots Radio. This is Spirit from Reservation Dogs. Get up and listen.
Welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
It's me. Representative Heather Keeler taking over today, joining my sisters in this work. I want to talk a little bit about Representative Ruth Buffalo and how murdered and missing Indigenous women, and actually Savannah's story, which Senator Coonish just talked about, was a pivotal movement, I guess, for me in this work. And I remember, I don't know, Ruth, if you remember, we were sitting at a picnic table, and at the time there were only tribal members on four-wheelers. And this had been almost 24 hours after Savannah went missing. We were all like doing our very best to do call to actions and bring work. And you and I sat there, and I feel like there was this moment that we looked at each other and we're just like, I guess we have to do it. You know, we have to step up and take this opportunity to lead this effort in our community. And I'm always so inspired and in awe of the way that you lead in community and really difficult decisions. You were an inspiration to me at that time. And then you went and you fought really hard to get a seat in the North Dakota legislature, and the work that you've been able to do there is so powerful. But can you talk a little bit to us just about what North Dakota is doing and what efforts you have going on, and why it's so important that we continue this awareness around MMIW?
Sure. Matsugidads, thank you in the Hidatsa language. It's an honor to share this virtual space with you. I feel obligated to introduce myself in our Hidatsa language, because we know once a language is lost, the nation no longer exists. And so, Niro Shadzi, Nakbaga O, Madashi, Mia Adesh Heads, Ma Basigids, Matsugidads, Nakbaga O. Hello, good people. I'm Ruth Buffalo, citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation, originally from Mandaree, currently here dialing in from the Red River Valley, original homelands of the Dakota people and the Anishinaabe. What we're doing in North Dakota, we're kind of very unique in a lot of different ways. Like, we're one of 5 states where we serve 4-year terms, and then we're one of 4 states where we meet every other year. So we don't meet annually, like I would hope that we do, or, to get more things done, but that's the structure. And so when I was elected into office in 2018, in 2019, our local MMIP task force sent me with a list of bills to implement in Bismarck. And so I had 6 bills with me that really transpired from the local grassroots efforts of our local missing and murdered Indigenous peoples task force. And so our task force really was birthed out of necessity after the horrific murder of Savannah for her baby Savannah Greywind. She was actually tricked into going upstairs to model a dress for $20. She was offered $20 to model a dress upstairs, because the couple upstairs had said the lady of the couple upstairs had said she was working on a sewing project. And so Savannah was expecting her daughter and had her whole life ahead of her. They had plans to, build a life together with Savannah's her partner at the time. And so it's a heavy topic. So it's really tough. I mean, even just going north, to North Fargo recently, we still get these like weird feelings, just going to North Fargo brings us back to the days when we were helping with the search, and many of us had never even searched before, but we, like, as you mentioned, dove right in and did what we needed to do to help where we could. So
yeah, it was definitely like an example of what community does in tragedy. And I think what from there we've been able to do is, like, we've moved that community mind frame into this work. And so I also want to bring Senator Red Dawn Foster from South Dakota is here. I know that she's traveling, but I just wanted to take a minute. I'm from South Dakota. My roots are from South Dakota. That's where my family is. I don't really love the hard lines that, the states provide us. We're really on land that we all moved across borders. And so to me, I just really feel like we're sisters and we're partners in this work. And so Red Dawn Foster, if you're there, I know that you're driving, but could you just talk a little bit about what got you into this movement, into this work, and what y'all are doing down in South Dakota?
Yes, Madakiapi, Chaje Mituaki, Red Dawn Foster, Imachapi, Chante Washtea, Nape Chuzape. Hello, Representative Keeler. It is so good to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Native Roots Radio. It's wonderful to share this space with everybody. And, the MMIW is we that both Representative Puri Puyer and I carried very close to our heart when running. We saw what was happening in other states, and I first became aware of just the difficulties of both jurisdiction and kind of the process and vulnerability of our Native women back in 2014 with Misty Upham. A relative of mine is her uncle, and they had voiced similar frustration and concern when she went missing, that the local law enforcement did not take her case or as a missing person. And so the search was largely left, or I would say solely left up to family members to look for them. And, when, of course, our families are really great at coming together in times of crisis, but we're really not equipped, especially at that time, to know how to run an efficient search. And we don't have that technology and everything that's available to law enforcement. So it puts us at a huge disadvantage when either the person is either abducted or has left on their own accord, but now is vulnerable to the elements, be it the harsh winters, or just people that they may have trusted and don't have the best intentions for them. And so seeing that, and then later hearing what was happening with Miss Graywind, and I think that brought just the Indian country to a pause, and really brought it up to our consciousness of what was happening. And I think that as Indigenous people, we love our relatives, and we have that concept of extended relatives. So it hurt many of us who maybe never even met her to our core. And I think that all of us were devastated to find out, through her generosity and her willingness to be a good relative and help people out, that it made her vulnerable. And then just what ended up happening is I still can't fathom. And so that was pretty much what we had brought with us. We saw the legislation that Representative Buffalo was bringing, and we looked, I think that just everybody here that in this space, we are lucky to have each other and to look to each other for guidance and look at what bills they're bringing and be able to learn and work and coordinate with that. So we looked to her for leadership and designed our bill when we were first in 2019 for gathering the data. And during that time, we also had a Republican counterpart, Representative St. John, who is a tribal member from Sisseton Wahpeton, who brought a similar bill that both bills made it through. One started on the Senate side, one is started on the House side, and they made it through legislation. And then through a joint committee, we combined the two bills. And so that was one of our first bills that we brought. And I know that Representative Puyer will be on the call. Is she on? Because then I'll wait for her to speak to some of her bills that she's brought, because she's really taken lead and spearheaded this charge.
Yeah, she's not on yet. We can watch for her and we can come back.
So the other large event that had happened is when I ran in 2016. It was a really large grassroots effort, and we had one woman in particular who was working on my campaign, and she was her name's Jessie Waters, and in 2015 she was killed by her partner, and I think that that's something that, again, with the complex vulnerability that our people have, that really brought to light just some of the struggles that we are encountering. And again, the coordination, the search effort was really difficult, and the law enforcement gathering of data, gathering of evidence once her body was found, and just really kind of influenced and brought what struggles we have. And so those were some of the things that influenced the legislation that we bring to the state.
Yeah, like data, I keep hearing people say, we tell stories and we collect data about the things that matter. And the fact that we didn't have any data, like you talk about, subliminally tells us that when our women and our relatives go missing, they don't matter. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. And the jurisdiction piece, I do think in a lot of the conversations I've been in, that tends to be kind of the way out. Well, we can't get around it, or it's such a big issue because of jurisdiction factors, or they're tribal members, or these different things. And I think we've learned a lot about that. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some of the other things that are important and why it's so important that we have representation in these seats so that we can address these issues. Come back.
Hey, Wendy, what are we doing for dinner after the show?
How about we go to J. Selby's on 169 Victoria Street in St. Paul? They have a delicious plant-based menu that's compassionate and environmentally sustainable.
I'm getting their spot-on vegan Big Mac, the dirty secret.
You can pick up and they deliver within a 5-mile radius, or you can call them at 651-222-3263 or visit jselbys.com.
Well, you sold me, Wen. Let's go order at J. Selby's tonight.
I'm hungry.
Stay healthy this winter by protecting yourself, your family, and your community from COVID-19. Get a vaccine or booster. COVID-19 vaccines are safe, effective, and free, and approved for everyone over the age of 5. Wear a mask outdoors in crowds and indoor settings, and lay low or get tested before visiting family and friends or attending events. To get more tips, schedule your vaccine or get tested, visit ramseycounty.us/COVID vaccine. That's ramseycounty.us/COVID vaccine.
Aho, relatives. My name is George McCauley, Omaha Nation. I'm a citizen of the Omaha Nation in Nebraska, but reside in the Twin Cities area. As we head into wintertime, many of us will be back together indoors. It's important to make sure you receive your COVID booster shot. Those 65 and over are recommended to receive their booster dose. Older Americans are more at risk for complications for COVID-19. So get your booster shot to make sure you stay safe and healthy this winter. All 3 COVID vaccine boosters have been approved. Find a vaccine site by calling 651-304-9986 or go to this website, vaccineconnector.mn.gov. 651-304-9986 or go to vaccineconnector.mn.gov.
Hi, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson, and I want you and all your friends to join my new show, The Santita Jackson Show, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 a.m. Central on the Progressive Voice of Minnesota.
Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States, and 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected. Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf. Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy. As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired. Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl.
Hi, everyone. AM 950 is grateful to the listeners who stepped up in the last year and helped support the radio station by becoming members. As we move forward, it's still important to help support small businesses like AM 950. We have memberships at any financial level, either a one-time donation or a recurring one, and we appreciate any support. We've already featured a lot of members-only bonus content like the calendars, but we have more benefits coming soon. To become a member, go to am950radio.com. That's am950radio.com. Click on the Become a Member button and sign up today. Thanks from everyone at AM 950.
Hi, I'm Rachel Shamblatt. My dad is Dr. Scott Shamblatt from Shamblatt Family Dentistry. A lot of people are afraid of the dentist, but you don't have to be. My dad makes going to the dentist comfortable and even fun. He won't be mad if you haven't seen a dentist in a long time. He just wants to take care of you and your teeth. If you don't see my dad, please see another dentist. Take care of your teeth because they're the only ones you get.
Shamblatt Family Dentistry in Hopkins and St. Paul. Find them online at shamblattfamilydentistry.com or call 1-800-FIX-MY-TEETH.
With a look at your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lulia. Cloudy tonight with a low of 8, then cloudy on Tuesday with a high of 30, and blustery winds up to 20 miles an hour.
This is Angela Warner with Warner Stallion. If you've got a broken appliance or one you wish would break, don't settle for poor selection and don't pay a penny more than you should. Warner Stallion has thousands of in-stock appliances, plus save an extra 5%. Shop now at warnerstallion.com.
Hi, I'm Jane Fonda, and you're listening to Native Roots Radio.
And we're back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
It's actually Representative Heather Keeler taking over. Robert and Wendy are not here today, and so I couldn't take over a show and not bring some amazing leaders with me. We're talking about murdered and missing Indigenous women because it's an awareness day, and it's something that we always have to talk about. But I think that there's so many things that are intertwined around our Indigenous youth, our next generations, taking care of our elders. And I know that every state is set up a little bit different. You know, we have different commissions, we have different state agencies, we have different overseeing entities of different organizations. And so I know that from Minnesota, Senator Coonish, Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, the Lieutenant Governor, we all worked really hard to take what we learned from the task force and develop an MMIR office, which actually we're really excited that we've hired our executive director to start at the end of the month. And one of the biggest components of that is breaking down the barriers of jurisdiction, looking at data and making sure that we stay consistent in our efforts around this epidemic. But I kind of want to go over to Representative Buffalo. I'm familiar with what we're doing in Minnesota, with kind of the overseeing things. But one of the data points that I heard in one of our committees was around human trafficking, and that now in the state of Minnesota, our MCAs are asking our 9th and 11th graders, have you traded sex for food, for shelter, for any of those things, and really asking about human trafficking, sex trafficking. And what we know is that in some parts of our state, we have 2.1% of our students in those ages are saying yes. And I think that those things are connected. So I know in North Dakota, there's some movement around human trafficking, and where maybe they play a role in this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. What we did when I first got into office in 2019 was we looked at kind of like a windshield survey, in public health, you see what's existing. And of course, talking to people on the ground, so to speak, who are doing the work on the front lines, but also having a working relationship with First Nations Women's Alliance and Senator Kathy Hogan. Prior to winning my seat, we were doing a lot of grassroots efforts, from the search to forming a local task force, to having booths at any and all community events like the Fargo Police Picnic, and just trying to make our presence known and to raise and amplify, the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous people here in North Dakota. And so we tapped into existing structures. And so in North Dakota, a few years before I got in, they have established a human trafficking commission, which is housed underneath the Attorney General's office. And so we also have a North Dakota Human Trafficking Task Force, which is separate, but there's still overlap. And so 6 of the bills that I introduced and were successfully passed in both chambers and signed by the governor, 2 of them included human trafficking prevention and awareness training, one for schools, K through 12, and then one for hotels. And then with MMIP, we started out with the bill draft as MMIW, and we switched to people to include all genders. And I don't know that North Dakota realizes like such progressive movement they did just by including all genders, because if you pay attention to what happens in North Dakota, there were, I would say at least 5 years. We meet every other year, so at least 3 times there were legislation introduced regarding protections for all genders, specifically LGBTQIA+. But that piece of legislation continued to get didn't go anywhere. It was stopped immediately. And so for us to have legislation that includes all genders is really something pretty big for us. A small win, we'll take it in a very red trifecta state. And so the other 2 bills focused on missing and murdered Indigenous people, focused on law enforcement training, and then the other is data collection. Data collection, after diving deep into what kind of databases are housed within the state of North Dakota, we found that there was no database period or at all that tracked missing people. It did have a one-time fiscal note at, what was it, like $45,000 or $49,000, a one-time fiscal note to update the Criminal Justice Information System database, CJIS, but that fiscal note passed the House in the House Appropriations, which is larger. It's a bigger committee. And then the Senate, it died on the Senate side, but it still passed into law. So this bill back in 2019 with data collection passed into law without funding. And so in following up on different bills or new laws and seeing, are they being enforced? Are they working? What can we improve upon? We found that this particular bill, I think it was House Bill 1313, and also keep in mind that our bill numbers get recycled too. And so people are kind of frustrated when they see something else that is completely polar opposite to human trafficking, as a new bill number, but learning as we go for sure as a pretty new lawmaker. But we were able to get the database fully funded during our special session. Long story short, the new dollar amount that was needed to get this database going for missing people was $300,000, which was really hard to wrap my mind around because it was like triple the amount that we had originally asked for, but that was the ask. And so we were able to get it done through using ARPA funds during the special session. So there again, we really need to make sure, be intentional at the state level to make sure that tribal nations are at the table, from the beginning to the end, start to finish of these processes, because they know best what works within their communities. And so this database will give access to across the different jurisdictions locally at the state level, tribal, county. So, I don't want to talk too much, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to chime in later.
I think it's good. I think that was kind of like a 101, right? Of like how legislatures work and how different they are and how, we can take this really great idea and we hear from our community what they need. And there's processes in each state. And it's interesting that you talked about, we go from the Senate side to the House side. There was money attached here. It was actually $300,000. I think it kind of goes back to the basics that there are so many things in this world politically that as Indigenous people, we just don't know. I didn't know how to run for the seat. I didn't know how to even become a legislator. And I think that that's a really common story. And then we learn from each other. Like y'all are kind of getting a glimpse of, we have this group text message, that we send messages to each other, legislators from other states, because we want to try to work on language that maybe looks familiar, or that we're kind of going down the same path. We all border each other. We know that people don't drive, especially Ruth and I, we literally are Fargo-Moorhead. We're across the bridge from each other. People don't come to my community and just stop. They keep driving and they drive into her community. And then they can drive a little bit further south and be in Red Ton's community. And so it's so important that we work together. So I think this show is kind of interesting because you're hearing this behind the scenes, like legislative policy pathway and how it's different in each of our spaces. Red Dawn, what are some things or some jurisdiction or some overseeing insights that South Dakota has set up that when we pass laws, or if there is data protocols or funding for these areas, what is South Dakota set up for like overseeing structures in some of those areas?
So one of the bills that was really important that was led by Representative Puyer last session was creating an office under the AG's office to coordinate tribal, state, and local law enforcement agencies in tracking missing Indigenous people. That is now gone through the process to attach funding to it. And so there's been a lot of behind the scenes work, and it's, you know, the full intent of that office is to create a liaison to deal with the complex jurisdictional issues that arise. As you say, there's a lot of fluidity. People not only are very mobile within the state of South Dakota, but also the neighboring states. So just addressing that mobility of you know, our vulnerable population. I think that a big thing here is, as was mentioned, is just acknowledging the grassroots organizations that have been leading this effort long before we even had Indigenous representation in the legislature. And so they really did do just on the grounds work, working with families, or identifying before we could even look to any type of law. They were trying to track, you know, mobilizing people, having protocols. So I just want to, you know, as well acknowledge the grassroots efforts that happened, because they not only made us aware of what was happening and supporting the families that were going through this, because sometimes it's a happy ending and the missing is reunited with the family, but when they're not, who steps in there and is the support for that family kind of till, you know, they're old, because it really devastates more than just that family. You feel the effects of the community. So we are not only focusing on legislation, but I think that I'm going to use a lot of my effort now of addressing our vulnerabilities within the community that is outside of legislation, because there's a lot happening within our reservation. Just this past weekend, Friday, we lost a young woman, a community member, Shayna Youngman, and I was talking to her family. And so this is something that I'm holding near and dear, and that it's very fresh, because that process of considering her missing was difficult. They said there wasn't a crime. It wasn't sure if she was missing or she had left on her own accord. And the family has said, you know, this isn't normal for her to leave. She is absolutely in danger, but it does not appear, because it's so new, it's not clear how that was approached, if she was considered missing and in danger, or if she wasn't considered in danger because there was no evidence of a crime happening. And so I think that addressing the vulnerabilities locally is going to be one of my efforts this next couple of years.
That's great. We'll be right back.
Hey, Olgama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN 350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN 350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org. Navigating COVID while protecting yourself can be difficult. Fortunately, there's a hotline you can call with any questions. The Department of Indian Work St. Paul partnered with the Minnesota Department of Health to open the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline. They provide information on vaccines, booster shots, and testing sites. Right now, booster shots are available to anyone over the age of 18 for those who are eligible. The Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline can also help with housing, food, medical, and educational support. If you or someone you know has questions about COVID-19, vaccinations, booster shots, or testing, please call 651-304-9986. Again, the number is 651-304-9986. The Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline is open for calls Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline at 651-304-9986.
Children's Minnesota raises up children's health by raising the standards, hands, voices, the bar, the stakes, the questions, and the curtain on raising kids' health to the highest priority. With the most pediatric experts in the upper Midwest, we're setting the stage because kids need us, all of us. So let's raise them up so every kid can reach their best health. Children's Minnesota, the kid experts.
This is Winona LaDuke of Honor the Earth, and you're listening to Native Roots Radio. I'm Awake.
Welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
We're taking over. This is State Representative Heather Keeler here with my friends, other amazing powerhouse women who are in legislative seats. And as we kind of close out the show, first, I probably should have said this at the beginning, but I feel like lately we've been engulfed in these conversations. I want to recognize that this is a really heavy topic, and we're talking about our loved ones. And I just want to recognize that if this is impactful and if this is an emotional conversation, we understand that. This wasn't meant to create any harm. We're really just trying to discuss what we're doing in the efforts that we're trying to do and how our relationship with community is so important in this work. So I want to move forward, and I want to bring all my sisters back, right, to talk about something bigger than MMIW. I think that all of the things that we've talked about here today are absolutely because we have representation in these seats. I kind of always tell the story. When I grew up, I didn't see teachers who looked like me, doctors, anything like that. But I definitely didn't see legislators who looked like me. I grew up right across the river from the state capitol in South Dakota. And I knew that things were happening really negatively to my community. I didn't make the connection that it was because people didn't have our back in these seats that massive decisions are made. State leaders make massive decisions that impact our communities, and representation is so important. I believe that our state leaders should reflect the population that they're serving. And we know that that's not the case. We've seen the numbers, and we know how many of us sit in these seats. But I kind of want to go through and ask each of you, in your role and in the life that you sit in, the seat that you sit in right now, how is representation mattering in those ways? I think for us in Minnesota, representation mattered for us to get this office, past just the task force report. And I think that it also matters because we're inspiring a whole other generation to know that they can sit in these seats with us. I don't want to do this alone. I know that we don't want to do this alone. We sit and we come together and we wonder, like, how can we engage the next generation to want to do this work with us, because we know representation is so important. I want to start with Senator Coonish, and then we'll go over to Representative Buffalo, and we'll end with Red Don Foster from South Dakota, just talking about representation in this work.
Yep. I'll say two things. One thing is that when we are in committee, the Native American women, and now other folks are starting to ask the question, have you consulted with the tribes? When there is legislation, whether it's transportation or the environment or education, and it's going to affect the tribes in your communities, you have to ask. You have to consult with the tribes. That's the bottom line. And at first, people would look at us with like confusion, like, what are you talking about? We never consult with the tribes. We never ask them what they think. And we ask that again and again and again. And not only does it get the other legislators to start thinking about how important it is that our tribal leaders are included, but it also empowers our tribal leaders, because now they start demanding to be included in those conversations. One way that I think really mattered a big bit for Minnesota and for me was with our BIE schools. Minnesota has 4 BIE schools, Bureau of Indian Education schools, and they have always been woefully underfunded by the federal government. The federal government is responsible for funding those schools. In Minnesota, they were not. The schools were in terrible repair, poor resources, just like not good. And we had some equity funding in our budget, and I got that the legislature to create an equity fund that will add state dollars to those federal dollars, so that at least all the kids that go to the BIE schools are getting the same amount of funding as the other public school kids. That was huge, and it made an immediate impact on those schools. And had I not been there, would it have happened? Maybe, probably. But I like to think that, as an educator, recognizing how under-resourced our tribes are and our schools are, that I was able to make that difference.
Mm-hmm. And I think representation in that space matters because you've been in schools. You understand the impact of being in schools too. Like, representation is not just an Indigenous thing. Like, it's just good to have everybody at the table. Ruth, what are your thoughts on representation?
Gosh, well, coming from a trifecta red state and being a sliver of representation, our Democratic Nonpartisan League caucus is shrinking. We had a few people who decided not to run for re-election, so they resigned or will be resigning, when this new election cycle comes up in 2022. So we, as it is, we have only in the House, out of 91 of us, there's, I think we're down to 19 or so. And then on the House side, out of 47 legislative districts, 10, but one for sure we know is not running for re-election. So very small numbers here in a very red state. Our Republican Party across the aisle, they are a super majority. And then on top of that, if we look at different types of demographics, I'm from the western side of the state, representing an eastern district, but I am also an Indigenous woman. I'm a citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation, and currently the only woman, I guess you could say, of color in our state legislature. We have Senator Richard Marcelese on the Senate side, who is a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. And so we have just 2 of us, I guess, if we were to form a Native American caucus. I'm super thankful for the National Caucus of State Native American legislators. But representation does matter in every level of government. I always try to hold myself accountable, prior to getting into office too, just with speaking up at city meetings, tribal council meetings. If I'm going to post on Facebook, I better back it up by showing up to this meeting and asking the same questions, and so just really trying to hold myself accountable in that respect, and trying to bring change across the different arenas. But representation definitely does matter, especially your lived experience. Nobody can take that away from you, as well as your education. But I hold our lived experience, with higher regard, just because it's community based, and our communities know exactly what the issues are in their communities and what best approaches to take. And when Senator Mary Kunesh was speaking on the lack of tribal consultation, that was actually one of my very first experiences in the hustle and bustle of getting co-signers for our bills and things, during that very hectic first few weeks of session, I had a lady from Dickinson, which is western side of the state, ask me, a fellow legislator asked me to sign off on, be a co-sponsor to a bill that would definitely infringe upon tribal sovereignty rights. But there was no qualms about saying, well, we'll talk to the tribes after we get the funding, which is a really backwards approach to things. So yes, lots of work that needs to be done. And please use me as a resource if you're thinking about running for office in North Dakota. I'd love to help you and get your campaign going. We have a lot of people running for local races, but we need more people to step up for the state legislature.
Yes. Step up, right? And we're here to help. I remember so clear, one of my very first conversations when I walked into my office is another member came in and he said, Keeler, they should have never shown us the path to get here because they know we're going to share it with other people. And so it is our job to share that. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Native Roots Radio, for allowing us to have this takeover. Pilamae, stay safe, stay healthy, and lift each other up.
Crooner's Supper Club has some great ways you can experience a delicious dinner and the best